what we've tried to do in the past is to kind of get you guys in front of the technology. So we bring the technology into the room, and that's typically in the form of the product managers or the heads of each of the product divisions. What we haven't done in the past is really exposing you to the chief technology officers that run our enterprise. So when you think about Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, what's the architecture that sits behind it? Who's doing all that planning? So you can kind of see the stuff that came out today, but that's all has to be planned. It's all 5-year futures. It's all a lot of brilliance that kind of comes out of a plan that has to change and morph over time. So I've managed to drag these two guys in. I've known Mark Linesch for a long time. I've known Mark Potter for a little bit less, but they're both really, really exciting people to talk to. Mark Potter will be the first to say he hides his talent under a bushel, but this is a great opportunity for you guys to really start to understand what's really behind that technology and how we bring that technology to market. And it's not so much the technology to market, but the planning it takes, that 5-year planning, that 10-year planning, around all these different obstacles along the way that actually gets us there. So without further ado, Mark Potter, hi. Mark Linesch.
Hey guys.
All right, well, I guess you want me to start then, Chris? Is that how this works? Anyway, Mark Potter, I'm the CTO, also director of Hewlett-Packard Labs. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you all. My background, certainly an engineer by trade, love technology. I've run a whole bunch of different businesses within the company, from software to the server business. If you think about C-Class, that was a product portfolio I helped kind of create as a general manager back in the day in the 2000s. But I kind of grew up in an environment where I learned from leaders that you had to kind of make some big bets in order to drive disruptive change, and you had to kind of stick with those bets over time. And so some of what we're going to share with you today, and looking forward to the questions, et cetera, is just kind of the life in the day of how do you get an organization to kind of change? What are some of the big macro technology issues we face? And a lot of times what we find, both Mark and I, and in general on these product categories, is there's a technology component that's very, very important, but how you internally message it, and then how you align it with a go-to-market or a set of sales resources, both technical in the field, very, very important, as well as kind of your traditional sales organization, is probably as important as the technology itself. I've had a lot of experience over the days creating some of the coolest products well ahead of their time that were abysmal failures because the necessary go-to-market wasn't there with it. And so we'll kind of talk about that. But first I want to kind of talk to you all about kind of how we think about research, how we think about the development life cycle in general. Our R&D, our research and development organization, really split into a lot of the business units themselves have what I'll call kind of localized development organizations. So think of the server team. A lot of those folks are in Houston, and we have folks all around the world there. But they're really thinking about, Proliant.next. They're thinking about Apollo.next. They're thinking about how do we take that mission critical space that we have a good revenue stream for, and how do I take it and extend that, and looking at adjacencies. And they tend to think what I call in the horizon one, kind of that 1 to 2 to 3 year range, okay? And that there's a lot going on there. There's new stuff that needs help and kind of getting up off the ground, and then there's like .next, okay? Meaning, Gen 10, for example. Then there's what I'll call the kind of the second phase of development, which is we call advanced development. It's maybe we don't have a product in that category, or maybe there's some ideas germinating out of the business teams because they see opportunities. They see partners coming to them, or they see field engaging with customers, really kind of kicking the tires on new technology. That's where the advanced development comes in, and it's like more proof of concept. How do we actually create a new category? How do we, in the near term, see something happening? And then how do we actually put proof of concepts behind it. It's more real. It would be where a certain space would have been kind of 3 to 4 years ago. It'd have been the early days of virtualization, for example, or the early days of cloud. It was all seen, but the business teams were kind of heads down, kind of thinking about their traditional way to go to market and their next version of product for that traditional. So that's kind of a 2 to 4 years. So that's kind of Horizon 2. Horizon 1, development, 1 to 3. Horizon 2, 2 to 4, kind of advanced development, maybe new categories, incubation, very important, an important adjacency that we're not getting to. And then there's things like research. And research is what we call Horizon 3. And think of that as, and these overlap 3 to 7 years. And what I have to do is kind of look across those different areas and think about those 3 horizons. First, I look into what's going on in the business units, and I get a lot of intelligence by walking around here. And it's the intelligence isn't let me go to a station and see what's happening. It's let me go to 10 stations and see where things are linking or ideas are kind of getting germinated but aren't linked and attacking a very important adjacency in the market. And so that's really where I spend a lot of time here, is kind of looking at that development, advanced development phase. But that research is where you see categories and projects come out, like the machine that we've been working on. And I want you guys to understand, in that research phase, we have to be super selective there, because we can't afford to make a lot of bets in what I'll call the horizon that is, 4, 5, 7 years. It is a lot of investment, and in that horizon, I will tell you, you change often. You iterate, and the point of that is you pick a vision and you say, look, we know that if 20 billion devices are connected in 2020, this problem is going to exist. And you say, what would we do to fundamentally solve that problem different? And what you start with, like the machine, which is the initial thought of the machine, was something like what we call unbound computing. How do we kind of break where we are today and kind of create a whole new architecture for dealing with this problem? Morphed into what we call the machine over time, okay? But it didn't start with, we've got the machine, here's the roadmap. It's a very loose vision of, we know we need to do something. We know that data is at the center of the world. How would we build a computer where data, versus talking about big data, where data truly was, or memory driven, was truly at the center of this architecture? And we start that journey, and I'll tell you, we don't have that answer in that, at that time frame. So those are the 3 horizons, and that's kind of what I think about. Mark helps me a lot here, but that's the fun of my job. That's also the challenge of my job. And I'll kind of close on this, and because I want to kind of have a conversation with you. The single biggest challenge I face at a company like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we have some of the most talented, brilliant, well-intentioned technologists on the face of the planet, and I am very fortunate to be able to work with them. The biggest challenge I face is, how do I harness and align them and get money behind them to sustain their ideas? And I do that in the context of not only helping them, but also it's about kind of getting management in, getting the go-to-market right, et cetera, through that journey. And so that's what I spend a lot of time on, is linking, harnessing, putting the vision out there, doing some proof of concepts, proving to ourselves, to management, and to engineering that things can be done differently. And so that's where I spend a whole lot of time kind of linking those things. But we specifically look across those 3 horizons when we're thinking about it, because you have to kind of divide up the here and now adjacencies and what's in front of us, gaps in the portfolio that we have to get on. We look at the advanced development, new areas, new opportunities, and then pure research. And they're all 3, kind of require a different approach by myself and the team. So I'll leave it at that, but that's just kind of a big framework of kind of how we think about stuff and how I look at what we're doing here, okay? A lot more goes into it, but that's a good start for us, okay?
And I'm Mark Linesch, and run strategy for Mark's CTO office and labs. And one of the things I'd say about strategy, right, is that everybody does strategy. Across those 3 horizons, there's lots of strategy. Part of my job is to integrate that strategy and to figure out how to then take some of those bite-sized steps from research through advanced development toward productization so that we can really fundamentally realize the visions of some of these great technologists out there. I'm not a great technologist, but I play one on TV, right? But we do have a lot of great technologists, and the ideas that they have, they need to be not only written down and integrated and tied to the business, but they also need a path toward sort of realization, if you will. And so just to echo Mark's quick thoughts, and we'll open it up, is a lot of the strategy that we do is looking at the horizon, looking at the mega trends and these types of things, but then starting to link and integrate those strategies toward the customer needs, toward the customer pain points, so that we can continue to deliver value, breakthrough products and solutions for our customers.
That's a little close. What are going to be the biggest challenges you see in the evolution of the data center over the next 5 years?
So I'll start. I mean, I think we're in the middle of it right now. Is there when you look at the big public cloud offerings, there's different patterns of architectures in place, meaning our traditional thought of a data center is I've got SAP and I've got Oracle, I've got an ERP, I've got Exchange from Mel, and that's certainly what I'll call the traditional kind of patterns and application environment of today's data center. But I look at the cloud, and the 5-year journey we have here is that as we have engaged and provide infrastructure into a lot of these big environments, their patterns are fundamentally different. In that, there's probably 5 to 7 different kind of key architectures, but everything is designed at a data center scale, and so we learn tremendous amount, because you can't kind of solve some of the problems at scale of these big workloads by starting with a 1U box, or even a 1U box with a couple of nodes in it. You really have to start with, here's my workload, and how would I design a data center from power delivery to the networking architecture to the management architecture to the services architecture in concert. And so we are doing more and more of that, but that's a big challenge for us, given that we have so much of our business and what I'll call on these traditional workloads, and still, most of the spend and et cetera is there. We are learning massively on those kind of workloads, and have created whole new categories of products as well as business models, because part of the innovation here is not always about the technology is not always the answer. It's a part of it, but as I was making the point earlier, it's having run multiple businesses, a lot of times you have to not only innovate in the technology, you have to innovate in the kind of business model as well, of how you're kind of dealing with this. And so setting up different go-to-markets, setting up different business relationships, thinking about how you get costs out of the supply chain, for example. Those are all innovations that are important in segments. But the biggest, to your base question, I think, is what is that opportunity? And when I think of cloud over time, I think of big data centers on-prem and big data centers in the cloud as kind of what I'll call the future cloud. Because I think there's this whole notion of a new on-prem that is emerging, and we can kind of talk about it as big trends. As I think as we think about all the intelligent devices delivering analog data into the world, and we keep talking about 20 billion, I think sometimes we listen to ourselves so much we don't believe it anymore because we're all so jaded. But something is going to have to give. All that data from a latency and a transaction perspective and from a machine learning algorithm and a response is not going to go off into some big ginormous cloud way away. And so there's going to be this notion of a whole new quote-unquote on-prem emerging in the what we call IoT. And it's super important in that we not only learn from the big cloud data centers that we're participating in, but also the big enterprise data centers we're participating in, but also in what I'll call new data centers like factory floors or automated devices, et cetera, because all those things are going to be playing a role together, and data models are very important. And how you deal with that data and the security and everything else is going to be an incredibly important trend. And it will be over the next 5 to 7 years that we have to kind of deal with this in a much better way. The machine and a lot of that research was trying to deal with that. And what we've talked to you about is kind of the notion of the big exascale. How can we actually go do workloads better? But that architecture, what we haven't shared so much with you is it's optimized. And when we think about memory fabrics, how do we actually tap into that new on-prem and deal with those devices as if they're local as well? And so there's a lot of work here in the notion of how to kind of deal with all the transitions going on in the devices and what I'll call these new data centers that are emerging over the next 5 to 7 years. So it's a really fun time, actually.
So I would just add one thing to that. I mean, if you listen to Meg's presentation around the hybrid cloud and the intelligent edge, right? You can imagine that we're now in this era of pervasive computing, right? Very pervasive, ambient connectivity, ambient pervasive computing. And so being able to think about the edge and the cloud, the data management between the edge and the cloud and the device or the person opens up enormous new opportunities for innovation, So how do we make hybrid cloud just simple and easy and pervasive is one challenge. How do we make the intelligent edge really intelligent, right? How do we make the interaction between the intelligent edge and the hybrid cloud secure and efficient and all those kinds of things? So there's lots of great opportunities, quite frankly, for innovation over the next few years. And this is what gets folks like Mark and myself and the teams really excited, is that there's just enormous opportunities to add value in lots of different areas that we traditionally, kind of have been stovepiped around, right? And so it just opens up just entirely new horizons.
I've got a two-part question, but they are sort of semi-related. So the first one is, how's your spending changed in terms of split of hardware, software, in terms of the way the labs invest their money over time? And secondly, I think quite a lot of us have been struggling to understand what your strategy is in general, because you talked about IoT and the intelligent edge, which seems to be a data play rather than an infrastructure play, whereas the company seems to have been traditionally majority infrastructure. So is there a move away to be more data focused? Just trying to understand, where all that's headed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest kind of noise in the system, I'll kind of tackle the first one. If you think about the journey we've been on, and it's a lot of planes to be landed if you think about it, we've created 4 very focused companies out of what was kind of Hewlett-Packard a year and a half ago, right? We've created a very focused kind of personal computing printing company called HP, very focused on that set of segments and the personal productivity and the capabilities we're delivering there. We've created a industry-leading services company called CSC, which was kind of half us and half them, focused on kind of service delivery and the managed service offering, so they can kind of 100% bring the best they can to that kind of market segment. We've created Micro Focus and taken half us and half them and created a better kind of enterprise, what I'll call entity around software with their, and then we've created Hewlett-Packard Enterprise as the 4th entity. And so back to your question is, that took a lot. And what you guys probably don't see behind the scenes is, and Meg talks about, is like, yeah, there's the IT split, but there's also like intellectual property splits between those companies. There's, back to that innovation, right? There's some very valuable patent and portfolio things that we have to kind of think about, because there's a longer term play here of like, where do we think those companies are going to be over the next 3 to 5 years? So that was a big part of it. But back to the strategy is, we have to make this hybrid IT simple, and we can't just use that as words. And so my job is like, what does that really mean, and how do we actually realize that through where we are today and how do we get there step by step, because it won't magically happen overnight with the Big Bang. There will be a series of steps around hyperconverged. There will be a series of steps around how do we link the data fabric from hyperconverged to 3-part, so you have best fit file block object with data protection integrated. And then how do we link that back to the public cloud instance as well? So all those things are in flight in what I'll call these different horizons. And it's super important that we execute on them. And then the second part of that is this intelligent edge. And I think we kind of understand this intelligent edge from the context of Aruba and antennas and Wi-Fi. But there's a whole lot more there. I think of Aruba as, I think of it as a software platform with an antenna. Okay, that's how I kind of think about Aruba. Because the best assets I see from my perspective of what we need to do is Meridian, the location services, and ClearPass, which is the policy and the fingerprinting of mobile devices getting on and off that antenna. Okay, now all of a sudden, if I have a platform there with security, with policy, knowing where things are, that can deal with data and scale like they can, and we'll give you some examples of that, boy, I can actually start thinking about things like automating the workplace. And that to me is enterprise IoT, right? How do I automate workplaces? How do I make scheduling meetings earlier? How do I, do the building management? That is, I look at Aruba as an antenna with an incredibly set of mature software. So what I'm working on in labs is working with them on that platform, okay? So that's the part of that strategy. The second part of that intelligent edge is there's an industrial IoT side of it. And there's what I'll call some very, very simple, adjacent, logical things we could go do in that industrial edge. That's how do we take a ProLiant server, and I'll just give you an example. How do we take a ProLiant server and harden it and make it robust and energy efficient and allow for a deployment of an industry standard architecture into a factory floor that maybe is not a data center? So that's what you say is like, it feels kind of like a hardware play in IoT. Let's just think of that as that horizon one. It's like an easy play for us. It's logical. We know how to sell servers. But the bigger play there is, what is that platform in the industrial IoT? How do I use ClearPass? How do I use our CMS assets, which is we have a very strong universal IoT platform? How do I pull those together and think about ubiquitous connectivity of any device, security and policy of any device? How do I allow programmers to get to it? How do I know location of those devices? How do I make sure those devices can't talk to each other if they're not supposed to? All those things are kind of being worked in what I'll call kind of Horizon 2 real time right now. And so that intelligent edge has a component that I'd say is here and now in the workplace through Aruba and what we know. But there's an incredible opportunity for us collectively as HPE. How do we bring our skill and knowledge of the enterprise into markets that are traditionally operational technology focused, SCADA equipment, etc.?
I think you brought up the other question, which is around this notion of, are you an infrastructure provider in a data world, or what's the rationale here, hardware and software? And what I would say is that the world is moving toward a recognition that data is really the lifeblood of insight and action and efficiency and a whole lot of other things. And that what software-defined infrastructure is the natural evolution of infrastructure. If you think about where Apple is and why Apple was successful with iPhone, it wasn't because they could create a good piece of hardware. It was because they could combine hardware and software to do what? Deliver a great experience. And so when you think of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we have probably many more software developers than we have hardware developers. And the value of our hardware is unlocked via our software and our software ecosystems and our software partners. And so fundamentally, in the world that we're moving toward, which is this pervasive computing, data-rich, insight, action-oriented world, you have to think first about the experience, and then you have to think about how do I deliver that experience using a combination of hardware, software, and services to deliver that experience. And we don't do that ever alone. We do that with a set of ecosystem partners. And so we're not a hardware provider. We're not a software provider. We're an experience provider. And the experiences we're trying to provide are around making hybrid IT simple and unlocking the value of this intelligent edge, whether that's the industrial edge, whether that's the mobile edge, whether that's the wide area LTE edge that we have tons of expertise in.
Well, I get to answer your question directly. Most of our engineering is software, okay? Whether it's firmware, but I mean, we have, as you can walk through the Hewlett-Packard labs, we bring a lot of our silicon and deep research into material science and optics, et cetera. This is back to what I think differentiates and why, Hewlett-Packard kind of started and created an incredible culture here is having the labs and that capability. We can go deep research, and the whole point of that research was there was a lot of hardware, but there was also a lot of software that we were doing in concert, changing Linux operating systems, securing containers, et cetera, as part of the machine. The million node management, which is a whole project in and of itself, because the security as well as the hardware was all important. So I'd say, in general, we have a whole lot more engineering time and resources and money spent, even in today's Hewlett-Packard enterprise, than we do in the hardware realm, but they're both important. And Mark said it is, one without the other is, I think you're kind of not able to kind of deliver on kind of the more disruptive things. I mean, maybe you can ride a wave, and then some categories we ride a wave. That's okay. We don't have to disrupt everything.
So people should think of you as a solutions experience company. Is that a better way of trying to position it?
That's one way to position it. I think that.
I mean, that's what you said, Mark.
Yeah, no, I think.
You said
I'm gonna let him own that.
Okay.
He said experience company.
Oh, it's just between us. Don't quote me on that.
That would be Twitter.
No, I think what the customer is looking for. Okay, whether you're talking about a consumer customer, whether you're talking about an IT customer who's running a data center or trying to automate a factory floor, I think what they're looking for are outcomes and experiences. Okay, and so with our R&D, what we're trying to deliver to those customers is great experiences. Right? We're not trying to say, here, buy my gear. Right? That's not working any longer. Is my gear any better than anybody else's gear? Maybe so, but it's not the point. The point is, why am I buying an Apple iPhone versus some other iPhone? It's not because of that piece of hardware so much as the combination of the hardware, the software that delivers that experience and outcome.
And some of it's vanity, because you want people to see you've got a raised iPhone.
That's true too. Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know, I'll pass the microphone away because I think otherwise I'm talking a chance. So for the IoT side of things, I don't remember you ever talking about that before. That seems to be like a new thing that's suddenly been added. And I'm just trying to make sure whether that's my perception or whether that's wrong or whether that's a new area, just...
Well, I mean, you guys are the voice, and if you're not hearing it from us, it's fair, right? And so when we talk about the intelligent edge, rather than just kind of throw a buzzword out there, that's kind of how we're thinking about the intelligent edge. I mean, IoT is wrapped up in there, and so we'll take that feedback, and it's good because I think we have to make sure we're clear as part of that. We've launched whole new categories, like in Discover in June in Las Vegas. I mean, we had a massive announcements with a partnership with GE around Predix. We had a partnership with PTC and ThingWorks. We have a close partnership with National Instruments. And you think about National Instruments, they're the development engine with LabVIEW all the way on the front end for the developers. And so, and then we created an OEM partnership with them where they're actually reselling stuff. And then we launched a whole new category of product. And that was back to my point earlier about, a very logical adjacent place for us to go first is create some partnerships and take our technology and go there. Then we also took the ClearPass technologies and we added some IoT enablement into ClearPass, which is our policy and security engine for the notion of the mobile edge, right? And so that we could actually secure and put policy around any kind of device, not just kind of mobile devices connecting. And so, anyway, we'll get more vocal on that. Appreciate the feedback there, but how I think about it, and I don't know marketing, but how I think about the intelligent edge and what Mark and I and the teams are working on is how do we go after that and actually bring industry standard and what we did for the data center. If you think about it, we've been on a long journey here. How do we bring that to this new, what I'll call on-prem?
Industry standard IT to the operational technology.
Okay. Hi, Phil Wainwright, Digital Nation. And so I'm curious about the future with processors, because what we're seeing in the cloud, as cloud data centers are scaling up, is giving the cloud, particularly public cloud operators, the ability to go deep on processor technology, and to actually, even companies like Google and Amazon evolving their own processors, Microsoft Atlas as well, custom built for specific coprocessor applications in machine learning. So I'm just interested in what your views are on the future roadmap in that area.
You bring up a great point. We are 100% convinced that workload-optimized computing is absolutely the right approach. And if you looked back, and this is back to a 5-year vision becomes kind of reality 2 years later, but back when we launched Gen 8 was all about kind of delivering a set of segmented computing offerings that were workload optimized for different segments of the market, okay? Because what we were seeing is customers, for example, not just cloud, you have to think about customers like Schlumberger, who has massive amount of oil and gas data that they've mined from dragging buoys through the ocean floors. They have incredible needs for like fast Fourier transforming of these data, and you're not going to throw an integer processor at that problem. You're going to bring something that's good at vector. You're probably, do you want single precision or double precision? And so, boy, that's where like things like NVIDIA and, those kinds of technologies matter. FPGAs are becoming good enough, and this is kind of a dynamic happening when you look at Dennard scaling, where we were taking advantage for many, many years of the fact that we could put smaller transistors and more of them in the same area and keep the power the same. That broke, and we talked about this in some of the machine work that we did. That ratio and that ability to put more transistors in the same space for the same power envelope stopped about a decade ago. So what that resulted in was the processor vendors starting to integrate more technology. You saw it first with AMD. What did they do? They said, well, you know what? We're not going to keep trying to drive the frequency up because the power is not supporting that. We're going to create multi-cores. But what else did they do? They moved the memory controller inside the processor, right, and optimized that because they had space. So there's two things happening. One is the number of cores are just growing to the point of making software development very, very difficult again, which is creating another problem in computer science, right? Second is we're not able to take advantage of that just linear scaling of, the power's the same. And all of a sudden FPGAs coming back with their frequencies are getting almost, not exactly, but getting close to the frequencies good enough of the cores inside a multi-core processor. So now then, if I can run a software algorithm and hardware via Geeks and do that 100 times faster in a financial application, or if I can do that real time on the packet wire as packets are coming across the NIC, boy, all of a sudden I can potentially create a new solution. So I'm going to come back to the big question of, I think we are in a renaissance of what I'll call workload-optimized computing. And you see this now with Microsoft announcing they put FPGAs in almost every single one of their things. You see Google talking about their machine learning. We have research going on in labs. We're not talking about it, but there are some incredible, I wish I could share it because it's so exciting.
novel analog, okay? Opportunities to take materials that we've never thought of before. This is back to the research side, wave 3, and apply those to machine learning algorithms, which are big, giant matrix math problems, okay? And so, exciting times. I think the whole processor and this workload-optimized computing thing is going to happen. And when you're running workloads at scale, you can no longer afford, from a cost and a power perspective, to throw the same exact tool at every workload. And so I think we're in a renaissance, if you will, of this notion. And Gen 8 started, Gen 9 further kind of cemented that, and we've been on this path for a while. We don't think it's going to slow down, and we think there's other technologies that will come along to actually further aid that. And part of the machine project was creating a fabric that could allow processors to be brought to the data that were workload specific. If you put the memory at the center, right, and we keep talking about this, is it may be an Intel processor, it may be one of their Knights vector things, it may be an NVIDIA, it could be a Google processor, it could be an FPGA with a custom Morgan Stanley app on it, right? So it's exciting times is all I can say. And so it won't just be the processors that we see, it'll be the technologies around them to enable this notion of the workload optimized data center become more and more real over time.
This is the industry journey. This isn't just Packard Enterprise's journey. It's the industry journey to move beyond a compute-centric architecture to a data center, memory-centric architecture, where I can have a pool of memory. I don't have to move that data. I can basically process that data with a variety of these specialized processors, the right GPU, the right industry standard processor, PowerPC, whatever is needed to optimize on that particular workload, that particular outcome. And I'd say one other thing about this, the value of the 3 waves that Mark talked about, or horizons, is the fact that we have been on this journey of realizing that this more segmented approach, this more memory-centric, data-centric approach is going to be a requirement. And we put some bets down, right? And we're seeing that world starting to unfold now. And we're going to see over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years productization of that research in the form of persistent memory roadmaps, photonic roadmaps, all types of more memory-centric and workload-centric types of solutions that we couldn't do before.
Well, it's not just about the processor. When we talk about workload optimized, these applications, it's about the I/O as well. It's about the storage architecture. And so, we spent a whole lot of time really developing a key set of segmented products for different kind of workloads. And so, anyway, I think it's as an exciting time as ever. And we're closely aligned with Intel here. You look at what the moves they've made, right? Look at what they've done over the past 3 years, right? They've created a set of vector processor in the Knights family. They bought Altera from an FPGA perspective. That wasn't because of any other reason, because this trend is happening and we're all kind of seeing it, and it's very exciting.
So I'm going to take it up one more level. Okay, so hybrid IT, by the way, I'm Paul Teich, Materials Research. And so the hybrid is a business model more than anything else. So on one side, we've got private cloud, on the other side, we've got public cloud. In terms of workloads and architecture, are you seeing any split in terms of what private cloud owners run and what they then push up to the public cloud? Is there going to be a schism? Are they going to come together, be the same thing? What do you guys see?
I think that when I talk to customers, what's interesting to me is they seem to all recognize that there's going to be a mix, right? That there's going to be a mix that they've got to understand and optimize around for their business and their outcomes. And that mix is going to be, what do I put in the public cloud versus what do I keep in the private cloud? And then there's people who say, I'm going to put everything in the public cloud, and people who say, I'm not going to put anything in the public cloud. But there's a mix there, right? And what I've seen from talking to customers is that, if you look at the kind of three major categories of workloads, being sort of transaction, system of record workloads, systems of engagement workloads, systems of analytic workloads, right? What a lot of customers have done is said, my system of engagement workloads that need to scale, that need to outreach to partners, to customers, to supply chains and things like this, that need agility and that need these certain capabilities that a public cloud can provide in terms of scale and the like. Those are the first ones that I'm going to really invest in the public cloud. My systems of transaction, harder to move, more legacy. I'm going to probably keep those, I'm going to shelter those in place, if you will, for the time being. Okay? And then because my systems of analytics are tied to my business processes and tied to my systems of engagement, I'm going to start to think about analytics as being threaded throughout my application portfolios. So I do think that many of our customers are actually struggling with and working through what their right mix is. Our technology services organization is pretty adept, quite frankly, is helping these customers through workshops and through roadmapping sessions kind of say, okay, well, let's look at your top 30 applications and let's start to think about a long-term strategy for where you want to put those and why you want to put those in public, private, and managed. And so I don't think one size fits all. I do think that there's a general trend to take advantage of the agility and the scale of public cloud where it really fits. But I think where it settles out and why hybrid is so important is because it really is all about the business model. It's all about being able to have the flexibility and agility to place the workload where it's best optimized for efficiency, for customer experience perspective.
I think I'll just kind of close because I think we're running out of time. I wish we could stay here 2 hours, quite frankly, 3 hours. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for spending the time. I'll just kind of say to your question, Paul, I agree. It is very much a business question. And I'm going to come back to where I started. A lot of times, Mark and my challenge, and in general, Antonio's and Meg's, is not that we don't have the idea or we don't see what's coming, because I think we all kind of see these macro trends coming. We're not kind of special clairvoyant in what's happening. It's in order to execute and operationalize them internally, it's a people issue. And I'm going to kind of come back to, a lot of times we forget as an industry how hard it is to change the people side of it. And I spend a lot of my time on innovation, working the people angle. And a lot of, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'd say 98% of my challenge is inside. Okay? We have the ideas. It's how do I change inside? How do I get people bought in? How do I find the money? How do I get people that are used to making profits and driving categories to understand that this other area is disruptive and they need to take a risk, right? And so there's a component of tops down that needs to happen, and that's my role. And there's a component of bottoms up. But innovation and what we think about in these three phases of horizons of development is as much about how do you kind of move people and move organizations as anything. And you have to be innovative there. And Mark and I spend a massive amount of time thinking about how do you kind of move this? What are their key care abouts? Where are they making money? What do they need? How can we help? So I don't want to bring them an idea and a problem. What I try to bring them is people, money, biz dev. I want to show them the market segments to kind of bring them along. And then I want to start small, because people a lot of times have trouble, especially when they're kind of heads down focused, kind of seeing a big inflection around the corner. So you just have to start small and kind of start moving that direction and not overthink it. Okay, and so I just want to close on that and just say, look, it's a privilege for me to be here in front of you guys. Thank you for all the support, all the feedback, all the help and continuing to kind of push us and guide us as well, because your voices matter tremendously, and we do listen. And appreciate you being here with us. I know it's a big sacrifice on your part to take time out, and appreciate the time and opportunity. I hope we do this again, Chris. Okay, thank you guys.